The Louisville Cardinals are next up on our Meet the Transfer series. We're doing the top 21 transfer classes that we have ranked here on the Brewers Media YouTube channel. Louisville checks it at number 11, right outside the top 10. Riley, I know had them 12th, just below the consensus. I had them 9th, just above the consensus. So right around that number 10, number 11 range for Louisville. Some of this has to do with the sheer volume of players that Pat Kelsey and company brought in. This is Meet the Transfers, but you could call this Meet the Team. Essentially, entirely new roster there that's going to be playing in the KFC Yum Center. So we'll start asking this because we evaluate transfer classes. You can do so in a number of different ways. But the main thing, Riley, is did Louisville accomplish what it set out to do this offseason?
Yeah, in the sense that it completely reset and retooled its roster. I think Pat Kelsey did a great job. We joked about this when we did the state of the program. I gave them a 10, or the highest score you could get for returners, because I didn't think you should return anybody from last year's disaster. I know some people thought it was nonsensical, but I had to go on the vibes with it. And not only did Pat Kelsey go out and really build a whole new team of transfers, and Kahani Roots, the one freshman coming in, he got a couple of studs, and we'll get to them, but I don't want to, spoil it too much, but I think Terence Edwards and Kaysen Pryor are both. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Kaysen, by the way. Louisville fans, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments. But yeah, I think both of those guys are kind of far and away better than anybody they had on last year's roster. So it's a clear talent upgrade all around to go with the coaching upgrade. So yes, we'll get a little nitpicky in a second to say what they could do better. But yeah, I think they did exactly what they set out to do.
Yeah, from the base standpoint, Pat Kelsey put a roster together because there's nobody back from last season. He put a roster together that projects to be significantly better than last year's team. Worst case scenario. That's a major win. You can argue about whether you think they're a tournament team or not. I think the jury is still out on that. We'll see how things work. But the fact that that is even a discussion with the way the Louisville program has been the last couple of years under Kenny Payne, like that's a win. That's a win. Is there anything they could have done better, you think?
To me, it's guard play. I think that's the one area where maybe, like, I think Corin Johnson projects as a fine piece who can function as a secondary playmaker. I just would have liked to see a little bit better talent at the one with Chucky Hepburn, better than Chucky Hepburn, given his price tag, or the alleged price tag that we heard. I think he's fine.
750.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I
Somewhere,
think that's what it
somewhere
was.
like 700 to 800K. Yeah. And, Chucky Hepburn's fine. He's played in tournament games. I actually think all but Corin Johnson of these newcomers played in the NCAA tournament this past year. Oh, and Frank Anselm. But everybody else comes from a tournament team. Seems that Kelsey wanted to add some winning culture guys who've experienced success. And yeah, like, again, Hepburn's played in the NCAA tournament. He has experience in big games, but he's just kind of a replacement level point guard at this level. Would you agree with me on that? Like, at the high major level, it's, he's probably not going to hurt you, but
we'll get into that. I think I'm higher on Chucky than you are. Part of that is me blaming Greg Gard and Wisconsin. But we will evaluate that as we get through these. I think two things. So I'm looking at Louisville. They don't have a true big man. I think some of that plays into the way Pat Kelsey wants to play his offense, is 5 out, wants to get up and down.
mm-hmm.
Pryor and Waterman fill that role that they want. But there's no real rim protector on this roster. There's no physical presence inside. Right. And I think you need that at some point in the ACC and at the level Louisville wants to get to. I think you need that. And I think this kind of goes into what you were talking about with the guards. There is no like surefire go-to guy. I think they're hoping Terence Edwards steps into that role. They're hoping to see Chucky Hepburn take a step forward. They're hoping Corin Johnson takes a step forward. But none of it is proven. You're not bringing in like a proven power conference star. Like the closest to it is Terence Edwards, who was the best player on the best team in the Sun Belt. You think that transfers over, given the level that JMU was able to play at and what he did against the best teams JMU played, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still a step up in competition on a nightly basis. So I would have liked them to bring on some guys who were some more proven at the power conference level. But again, Louisville had a lot they needed to fill. And At some point, you just gotta take guys, right? You gotta take guys. Well, let's go through them. We're gonna assign each of them what we think the role is going to be this next season. There are 10 guys to get through, so we are not going to give you dissertations on all 10. There are 2 guys, though, who Louisville did bring in that are redshirting this year. I want to make sure we mention them. Ali Khalifa from BYU, Kobe Rogers from Charleston. Both are expected redshirt this season, participate next season. But for the purpose of where we think they're going to fit into this roster for next season, we're going to not include them because they will not be included with the roster. So let's take a look at this. We're going to start with the lowest points per game and go all the way up to the top. You mentioned him. That's Frank Anselm at the bottom. He averaged 2.6 points per game for Georgia last season. Just over 9 minutes a game. He was a rotation piece on Georgia. Projects to be that, I think, for Louisville as well.
I say non-factor. I don't think he's going to be in the rotation. I know they don't have like many true fives, but yeah, I think Anselm's just there for the good vibes and like in case of emergency.
I think so too. We're looking at guys with either stars, starters, role players, or non-factors. Anselm's a non-factor. I think if he becomes a factor, it's because they are getting absolutely bodied inside and he has to play, which is I think a concern. Next guy, probably a similar boat, James Scott from Long Beach State. He averaged 5 points per game for Long Beach State last season, 16 points per game. I know they're high on him because of his efficiency, but going from 16 minutes per game at Long Beach State to now the bench at Louisville makes me think he might be further down the bench than he was at Long Beach State.
Scott was at Charleston.
You're confusing him with wrong?
Yeah, James Scott was from Charleston. He was there with Pat Kelsey last year. Abubakar Traore is the Long Beach State guy.
I need to talk to Jim Root then because Jim Root has those switched up on his roster sheet. My apologies.
Come on, Jim.
My apologies. So James Scott, who brings with him from Charleston?
Yeah, I can give you the lowdown on him. I think he'll probably be a non-factor, but there's a chance he could crack the rotation just because he is more in the mold as that true 5. Little fun stat, made 76 field goals last year as a true freshman. 52 of those were dunks. Dude is super bouncy. He is in there to catch lobs. He's in there to get on the offensive glass. And, that's been a staple of Kelsey's teams really throughout his Charleston tenure and his Winthrop days. They play fast. They crash the glass. And I think Scott fits that. I could just see him get pushed around a little bit in the ACC. He's very skinny, but his bounce could get him on the floor. It wouldn't surprise me if he cracks the rotation, but I'm going to go with a non-factor for now.
I'll go with you. I think the potential is there. Shot nearly 80% from the field last season, mostly because he was dunking the ball, as you mentioned. Yeah, I think he's more of a non-factor with this as well. The next guy is Chucky Hepburn. 9.2 points per game last season. There's a lot of guys who averaged double figures last year that are coming to this Louisville team. I don't think scoring is going to be an issue. Chucky Hepburn was not one of them. More high profile, but 9.2 points per game. Did average 4 assists, over 2 steals. I know we talked about him briefly, but where do you think Chucky falls into this?
I mean, he's a starter. He's being paid like one. That would be a huge shock if he's not, playing the majority of the minutes available at the 1. This actually surprised me as I was prepping for this. Wisconsin had a top 20 offense last year. First time in Greg Gard's tenure. It was by far the highest since they were the number 1 offense in the country in 2015 and Kaminsky's last year. But despite being top 20 offense, they were 336 in tempo. And he's going to the polar opposite with Pat Kelsey, who's 43rd in tempo by comparison last year. Actually, I think Kelsey was 2nd in tempo his first year at Charleston. Like the dude loves his teams to play fast. And that's one of the biggest storylines for this Louisville team for me is can Kelsey unlock something out of Hepburn? Like we haven't seen him in a system yet where you can get up and down just because kind of like I said at the beginning, I think he's a steady high major point guard who's not really going to hurt you, but just isn't especially spectacular.
I like him in this system. I do think playing that slow hurt him in terms of like his production and his skill set. He can create some off the bounce, but he's not like an uber athlete. He doesn't have great size, but he does have good feel for the game. And I think playing in a more sped up system is going to give him more opportunities to attack defenses that aren't set. And the guys who were around him at Wisconsin were not creators, right? There was no one else who could necessarily do something off the bounce. The one time he played with somebody like that was Johnny Davis. That happened to be, I think, Hepburn's most impactful season when that was the case.
That's a fair point. I didn't even really think about it like that. Maybe having a wing like Terence Edwards next to him, along with playing a little more up tempo. Actually, I should say a lot more up tempo can unlock something there. So yeah, I don't hate that, Ralph. I don't hate that.
Opposite ends of the tempo spectrum here, very opposite ends. Now he's got to produce in that, but I think he's going to get more opportunities at having easier opportunities, like more chances at easier opportunities to score and create and do things. He can run an offense. He doesn't turn the ball over a ton. You want to see the efficiency numbers go up, particularly with his shooting. Again, I think some of that just has to do with the way I think teams had to defend him because he was the only threat Wisconsin had with the ball in his hands. So we'll see what happens from there. He is a starter, I think, penciled in no matter what. But I'm expecting him to have a bigger season, probably his best season of his career, from a numbers standpoint than any of his Wisconsin seasons. Up next is Noah Waterman. He's the last guy on this list who did not average double figures. So there's 6 guys who are going to be in the rotation for Louisville who averaged at least 11 points per game last season. Wide variety of scores. Noah Waterman is not one of them, but he is somebody who I don't think I'd be surprised if he did average double figures. It was 9.5 BYU last season. BYU essentially played 10, 11 guys, much like Louisville may this season, which cut into that. But I think he has a chance to make a pretty big impact for this team.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts. I'm sure he'll log a couple starts. I ultimately see him as a bench guy, but solidly in the rotation just because the summary of him is he's 6'11" with a burner. Dude is a 38% career 3-point shooter, and he's played a lot of college basketball. I think this will be his 6th season. He's made 162 threes for his career. So you find a place for that guy. He did it in the Big 12. Really good bench piece, in my opinion.
I think so, too. I think you look at him and Cason Pryor, one of them is probably going to start the 5. The other one's probably going to be like 6th, 7th man off the bench. I'm not sure which one Waterman is going to be. I would project him to be more of the bench guy. But he's going to be one of those role players that plays starter level minutes. He has the shooting and the versatility of the face-up game, ball handling, even passing that Pat Kelsey loves with his big men. Like Cason Pryor does too. We're going to get into him, and that's why I think they're both good fits for this offense. Doesn't bring a ton defensively, which is going to be a question mark with Louisville, I think, in general this season. But he fits the system. It's designed to essentially fit his game and get the most out of him. I think he plays a pretty good role for the team, even if it is off the bench. Corin Johnson averaged 11.1 points per game last season, the Washington transfer. He is one of just 4 if you count BYU since they were Big 12 last season, 4 power conference transfers that are going to Louisville. Mentioned 11.1 points per game. He was a good player for Washington, not a great player. What are you expecting from him at Louisville?
I think he's kind of flying under the radar. I pencil him in to start at the 2 guard. At this point, he's pretty much a standstill spot up shooter. I think almost all of his makes were just on catch and shoot. He's not really shooting off the bounce or anything, but still shot 38% last year, decent volume. Really, really good secondary playmaker. Some of the live dribble passes he made at Washington last year and his ability to get into the paint, find open shooters. That's what, again, getting into a better context with better wings and guards around him than he had this past season. And frankly, a much better coach in Pat Kelsey compared to Mike Hopkins, who's not there anymore. You might see something, again, unlocked a little bit from Pat Kelsey.
I think so, too. I think the opportunity is going to be there. His shooting is certainly going to help. Again, we're talking about Pat Kelsey team. You're going to talk about a team that is just loaded with shooters that are positioned. I think that's like a prerequisite to play for Pat Kelsey. But that, along with some of the other stuff you mentioned, is going to allow him to play a pretty big role for the team. I have him as a starting 2 as well. I think if he's not starting, that's probably a good thing for Louisville, because that means somebody else stepped up and is a star. To me, he's somebody who's one of these very high floor players who he has a power conference experience coming from Washington. You know what you're going to get from him. You hope you can get something else. Worst case scenario, he's not your worst starter, right? And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I think for a team of question marks is a bonus to have.
I'm with you.
Next transfer also comes from the Pac-12. Javon Hadley from Colorado. Colorado team that had 3 NBA draft picks with KJ Simpson, Tristan da Silva, and Cody Williams. Javon Hadley was second on that team in minutes, averaged 11.6 points, 6 rebounds per game, 2.4 assists, shot 41.7% from three, nearly 54% from the field. He did everything for Colorado, was kind of a glue piece. Now he comes into Louisville. What kind of role do you see him having?
Probably your first wing off the bench, just because I think you're going to want the size in the front court with Case and Pryor, maybe with Traore or Waterman or well, unless you play Terence Edwards. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I guess you could play him at the 4. I think I'm going to alter this and say he's starting at the 4. Yeah, I think he and Case and Pryor probably are the starting front court. Honestly, I thought he was more of before like doing prep for this. I thought he was more of like a 3-and-D guy, but he only made 23s last year, just a good percentage of it. Yeah, just a solid swing forward who can play both the 3 and the 4, and again comes from a winning program. Something else to note: both he and Noah Waterman posted really good defensive rebounding rates. And we'll get to Traore as well, who fits that bill. Again, just looking at how Kelsey teams have functioned and how they want to win, you got to rebound to stay on the floor for him, and I think he'll be able to give you some of that as well.
I think Hadley's a starter. I don't know if that's a starter at the 3, and maybe you go with 2 of Hepburn, Corin Johnson, and Terence Edwards, and then go with Hadley at 3, Waterman and Pryor at 4 and 5, or probably more Pat Kelsey to go small, slide him down to the 4 because you mentioned his rebounding will allow him to do that. He's somebody this team needs, who's going to play a lot of minutes, again, experience in a power conference, efficient, does his job, but doesn't need to be the star, right? He's going to be productive. He's going to be efficient, going to do what he needs to do on both ends of the court, but he doesn't need the ball in his hands to make an impact. I think we're going to get to some guys who do. And it's good for Louisville to have somebody who is used to playing over 34 minutes per game, like he did for Colorado, to be that kind of connective piece and a true glue guy. This is your glue guy in Javon Hadley. I think that's perfect for this Louisville team. You brought up Traore, Boubacar Traore from Long Beach State. His rebounding numbers were high. He's the terms of, if you take last season's stats, 8.4 per game, which is the most anybody on this team averaged last season. 12 points per game to go along with that. 4.5 assists per game too for my guy. What role do you see him having with this team? I think he's an interesting piece.
Yeah, he's really freaking good. He's just like a 6'5" power forward. That's the only thing that scares me is he's not big, but like you watch him at Long Beach State, they used him as a pick and roll ball handler. Like his assist numbers are great. He's a near triple double threat. I mean, yeah, he actually in the Big West tournament put up a triple double against UC Riverside, had 12 points, 11 boards, and 13 assists. Like that's ridiculous. Had another game against Santa Barbara, 18, 9, and 10 assists. Oh, 10 turnovers too. So he got the Westbrook triple double there. But yeah, I think he can do a lot of things to help your team win. He's a unique player with a good motor. He's active. I think he finds a way to crack the rotation. It's just so rare you see these like super, super undersized foremen or front court pieces make as big of an impact like once they're transferring up a level. I'm really curious to see what his role will be, but I think he does so many things well that he's going to find a way to play.
He is an absolute wild card to me because his production in all those different areas I mentioned. Didn't even mention he averaged an assist or a steal and a half and a block and a half per game. 2. How do those things translate from the Big West to the ACC? I think remains to be seen, because you have to anticipate he's not going to be as effective or as productive, right? Just naturally. Great if he is, but if he's not, I think he's a good role player and a piece you can plug into different spots and create some matchup problems. If he does translate and is somebody who can give you 10, 7, and 3 or 10, 7, and 4, I think there's a chance he's a starting four and becomes like a real matchup nightmare in the ACC, just with what he can do and the versatility. It takes a certain kind of coach to know what to do with different players like that. And I don't know if Pat Kelsey is that guy, but his system is one that lends itself to somebody like Traore being able to make an impact, and them and Kelsey and that coaching staff using him in really fun ways. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's going to be in the bench role in like 15 minutes a game or as a starter playing 25, 30.
Mm-hmm. I Yeah, I struggle to see starter minutes, but again, if you look at some of the performances that he had, like he had a 20 point 20 rebound game as a 6'5" like big guard, basically. I don't know.
Right.
Some just that motor's gonna help him get on the court. And if he just even if he just hits the glass and is like can make smart passes and be used as like a ball screen handler on occasions to create some mismatches, I think he finds a role. So
I think he does too. Personally, I think Ryan Smith does as well.
mhm.
Transfer from Charleston was kind of the heart and soul of this past season's Charleston team. Averaged just under 13 points per game. Didn't do a ton else from a production standpoint, but played really good defense. If I recall correctly, he came up with like the game-winning steal in the conference title game in the
Mhm.
tournament that essentially punched Charleston's ticket. He's going to be allowed to play some defense. Shot 40% from three, 41% from the field. He's basically just shooting threes out there. Um, I don't think he's going to play a significant role, but I do think there is a definite role.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would say rotation and probably a spot starter. To be honest, he's someone who I've kind of had my eye on since his freshman year at Charleston. He lit up UNC in a game as a freshman, and I kind of thought he would have transferred before now. He hit, yeah, that game I was referring to, he hit 5 threes against the Carolina team that went on to lose in the national championship. So it's a guy I've always thought could play, but you hit on it. He's a 3 point specialist, but yeah, I love that he has a little bit of defensive aptitude as well. That should help him get on the court.
Yeah, and he's a Pat Kelsey guy.
Mhm.
He's gonna be the one where like if Louisville starters come out flat, he throws Ryan Smith in the game to like jumpstart everybody. That's gonna be his role. It's gonna be minimal, but I do think there's gonna be a role there for him. There's certainly a role for Kason Pryor. We've brought him up probably 10 times already in this video. We're just now getting the spotlight on him. Um, he's a definite starter. I think there's a chance he's a star. There's
I'm
small
with you.
chance.
I think there's a decent chance he's a star. I freaking love Kason Pryor's game. He's got great length, good size. He's so freaking active. His motor's awesome. I mean, he can handle a little bit. You can play him out of dribble handoffs. I wouldn't say he's an insane vertical athlete, but he is more than athletic enough to be a lob threat and to have some highlight reel dunks. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Pryor.
Highlight reel dunks, great face up game. He's really good at catching the ball at the high post, facing up, and then taking defenders off the bounce. Which, if he's playing the five with the spacing that Louisville has or projects to have, is going to be very dangerous. And I think be very central to what Louisville's offense wants to be because he's a good passer too. And so, kind of have him being that secondary hub, secondary playmaker from the high post, I think gives both Louisville's offense a high ceiling and gives him a high ceiling as well. Like I think he's incredibly, incredibly important to this team. But no one's more important than Terence Edwards, in my mind. We brought him up the JMU transfer, Sunbelt Player of the Year, averaged over 17 per game, 4.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists. Was the best player on a JMU team that went into East Lansing, beat Michigan State, dog walked Chucky Hepburn in Wisconsin in their first round NCAA tournament game. They then got dog walked by Duke. However, he's a very, very good player. And I do wonder if he can be that guy at the ACC level. I think he can, though.
I'm with you. I said star for him. I think he makes an all conference team. The most importantly, he gives Louisville an ISO scorer who you can put the ball in his hands as the shot clock's winding down and trust him to get a bucket. With bringing Hepburn in, my main thing is like, I'm cool with Chucky, getting his point guard reps and everything, but I just, I want Terence Edwards to be the guy who's tasked with creating shots for both himself and others as like the alpha for this
Mm-hmm.
Louisville team. I think that's how he would be best used. So yeah, I'm all in on Terrence Edwards.
There was a stretch at the end of Rick Pitino's tenure at Louisville, and I think even into the start of Chris Mack's tenure at Louisville, where there was like 3 or 4 years in a row where they would pluck a quality mid-major player transfer, plug him in, and he became the star and like one of the best players in the ACC right away. Like Damian Lee comes to mind immediately.
Yeah, bucket.
Terrence Edwards to me is like just is that where he's going to be plugged in, be the star, and I think be one of the ACC's better players right away. We'll see though. We'll see what happens. Again, making the jump from the Sun Belt to the ACC is not something everybody does successfully. Let's have to wait and see what happens there. We'll get into some questions now for this group. First one, the end of the season, who's the best player?
Terrence Edwards.
I think at the beginning of the season and the end of the season, it's Terrence Edwards. But who improves the most of this group?
How much more can Case and Pryor actually improve? I kind of want to go with him, but yeah, I'll go Case and Pryor. I think he might struggle a little bit just with the, more athletes that can match him, more size moving up a level. But I think somewhere along the way, he's going to sort of figure it all out and become a two-way beast.
He was the first person that came to mind for me. I also think Traore is an excellent candidate for this. I think there's going to be a learning curve, obviously Big West of the ACC. And I think there's going to be a learning curve from Pat Kelsey on how to use him best. I think that's something that they're going to learn each other and feel each other out as the season goes on. And I do think by the end of the year, he's going to be a very vital, very fun piece to what Louisville wants to do. Hot take. We're gonna end this. What is your hottest take with this transfers with this Louisville team this season?
I think Rain Smith makes double-digit threes against UNC and Duke combined. If he let's say Louisville plays both UNC and Duke once apiece, I think he's combining to hit 11 threes. Like at least 10 threes. I would set the line at 11.
Okay. You were just scarred from that one game, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I mean, dude's a freaking sniper.
He is. Oh yeah, he is. I think Chucky Hepburn makes an all ACC team. I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know which one. I have been a Chucky Hepburn stan. I was happy to see him break out of Greg Gard's system. Just to give him some more freedom, right? And he's going to get that Louisville Pat Kelsey here. Don't know if it's first team, may not be second team, but I do think Chucky Hepburn and Terrence Edwards as well make all ACC teams from this Louisville squad. We'll see what happens though. It's a brand new team, brand new era for Louisville, and if you're a Louisville fan, that's probably a good thing.
Car, you know what I love about you?
That I'm handsome?
You're reliable. I can count on you. Honestly, you remind me of Aaron Henry a little bit. Remember when their back was against the wall, nothing was going right, and man just showed up every day. He didn't make excuses. There were no problems. There were just solutions.
Sounds like me.
That's you. And it also reminds me of Duncan Mechanical Solutions, because if you're looking for quality furnace repair, look no further than the heating and air experts that you can trust. Comfort and quality are their standard. They're an HVAC company that serves Northeast Indiana and Southern Michigan, whether it's heating and air conditioning, plumbing, kitchen and bath remodeling, or emergency services when you need them most. Duncan Mechanical Solutions has reliable service that you can count on. Cart, remember when your basement almost exploded?
I remember when my basement almost exploded. I remember when my furnace itself was acting funny. I remember when my AC was acting funny. I wish I had Duncan in my back pocket. I wouldn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been anywhere in Northern Indiana or Southern Michigan that hasn't been perfectly cool or perfectly warm, depending on when the day called for, and that's because of Duncan Mechanical Solutions. They are the presenting sponsor for the month of July. Shout out to Duncan Mechanical Solutions. Go to duncanmechanicalsolutions.com to learn more.